Hello, everyone. Alchemist here. I'd like to thank you very much for tuning in. I truly appreciate it. Today, I want to talk about a subject that is quite a mystery to many people. It has been a mystery, and it's still a mystery. However, many people resonate with this, and many people believe that it has existed. It is Atlantis, the story of Atlantis. Almost everyone probably watching this video have heard of Atlantis or the story of Atlantis in one way or another. But here's the million-dollar question. Why is everyone obsessed with Atlantis? Why is everyone so curious about Atlantis? There are many other mythical cities or mythical stories around the world from different cultures, from different countries. But why the extreme obsession about Atlantis? The answer is simple. Because it was real, because it was true, because it did exist. And somewhere in the subconscious mind of people still remember it, especially if you've had a past life there. And many souls have had a past life reincarnation in Atlantis. But where does the story of Atlantis come from? Where does it really originate from? The story of Atlantis originates from one source, which is the Platonic source, from Plato. And Plato is the one who described Atlantis, and that it was an advanced civilization that existed way before Egypt, before the flood, and that they were very, very advanced, much more advanced than even Egypt, because the Greeks learned everything from Egypt. Every knowledge that the Greeks have had, they got it from the Egyptians. Even the story of Atlantis, because Plato got his story of Atlantis from Solon, another Greek philosopher, who learned the story of Atlantis from the Egyptians in an Egyptian temple, in one of the temples of initiation in ancient Egypt. So the story of Atlantis comes from ancient Egypt. It is described by the Egyptians, and the Egyptians say that whatever we know about Egypt and ancient Egypt, with its gods and culture and the pyramids, is the remnants of the Atlantean civilization. Meaning that the ancient Egyptian civilization is a descendant civilization from the Atlantean civilization. And that's why even ancient Egyptians lost a lot of that knowledge. And towards the end of the ancient Egyptian civilization, they lost the knowledge to build pyramids. Because the knowledge to build pyramids like the Pyramid of Giza, or the pyramids all around the world, stems from the Atlantean civilization. Even though Plato described it to be as an island, it was a worldwide civilization. Atlantis existed on a continent between the American continent and the African continent, or Europe, right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. There was a huge piece of land in there, that's why they called it an island, but it was way bigger than an island. It was the size of a continent. And it all sank. That's why these beautiful islands that are in the heart of the Atlantic Ocean, either on the American side or the European side or the African side, they're the remnants of the land of Atlantis. Atlantis was a worldwide civilization. That's why you find the pyramids everywhere around the world. Everywhere. You find them in Egypt, you find them in Mexico, in the American continent, you find them in Indonesia, you find them in China. There are pyramids that are still covered by nature. And the countries don't want to disclose that they are pyramids. They're keeping it as a secret. And these pyramids from far away, they look like mountains, but they're not mountains, they're actually pyramids, or they look like a huge hill. So there are pyramids all around the world. And those are just the remnants of this civilization. But the hub of the Atlantean civilization was in that land that sank in the Atlantic Ocean. I'm going to give you an example. There are many countries around the world right now. Some of them are advanced technologically and economically, and some of them are not. And even within these advanced countries, there's advanced cities, metropolitan cities that many people want to live in. Many people go there to seek jobs because of the economic growth of these cities. Those are the cities that can allow you to have jobs, to have money, to make a proper living. Versus if you go to a secondary city or a small city, you might not make it, or you're not going to have as many opportunities as these big cities. And that's why you're going to find that, for example, a lot of people will go to New York to try to find a job there and settle there or work there. Or they're going to go to London in case of England, or Paris in case of France. There's going to be always more people trying to go live in Paris rather than the other cities of France. The same thing, let's say, for Istanbul in Turkey, or Tokyo in Japan, or Seoul in South Korea, or Bangkok in Thailand, or Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, or Jakarta in Indonesia. These are all big metropolitan cities that people are going to try to migrate to look for jobs, to look for money, to look for opportunities. And these cities are the hub, they're the center. So back in the Atlantean civilization, that was the case of that land that was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. That was the hub. That was the most advanced place. There were many other cities and countries around the world that reflected the Atlantean civilization, but the hub was in that land in the Atlantic Ocean that ended up sinking with the flood. That's where everyone settled. That's where everyone went for advancement. Did they have the same technologies we have? No. It was completely different. They merged the elements and nature with their advancement. It was magic. The use of magic was very normal. And even people were different. The humans of now are completely different from the humans that lived in Atlantis. They had nothing to do with Atlantis. Prior to the flood, humanity was very different. People were much taller. They were larger. They were giants. You probably have heard of them. They lived longer. They lived for hundreds and hundreds of years. There is even proof of this in monotheistic religions. It is said that, for example, in Islam, it is believed that Adam was a giant, first of all, and he lived for 900 years. Adam, considering that he's one of the first few humans, if not the first human, he was a giant and he lived for 900 years. So the descendants that came after him, the humans, they were reflecting Adam. They were reflecting Eve. They were reflecting the first few humans who were giants and lived for hundreds and hundreds of years. We, us as humans right now, are a regression of what humans used to look like. We were very close to the gods. How these higher beings or devas or asuras, these deities, how they looked like, we were close to them. We kind of used to look like them. We were giants. We lived for hundreds and hundreds of years. We had magical powers. Magic was something normal. It was natural. And Atlantis reflected that. So it was a very different realm. even with the fantasy movies and the novels, they can't describe what was Atlantis like. What's your most favorite fantastical novel or movie? What? Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or Game of Thrones? They can't even come close to what existed in Atlantis. And we can't imagine. Even if we try to imagine, we cannot. And they were advanced in a very different way. We, compared to these Atlanteans, were like nothing. With our mere technology that relies on chips and motherboards, this is very archaic technology compared to what the Atlanteans had. Because the Atlanteans knew how to use magic. And magic trumps any kind of technology you can imagine. There were also many other creatures and mythical beings who lived there as well. It was not only humans. It was gods, it was deities. They were like dragons and other creatures that lived there. It was just like this magical, fantastical world that has nothing to do with what we are experiencing in this day and age. Who built Atlantis? It was Poseidon. He's a god. He's a deity. And he coexisted with the other humans that were living back then. Poseidon built Atlantis, and he was the ruler of Atlantis, and his son was the king of Atlantis, his son named Atlas. Atlas, Atlantis. Where did it exist? Atlantic Ocean. You think that these names are random? They're all connected to Atlantis. The Atlantic Ocean is named after Atlantis. Atlas. Where do we find Atlas in the whole world? The Atlas Mountains in North Africa, specifically in the country of Morocco. How come, I'm just asking you to use your mind here, how come in the whole world there is a chain of mountains called the Atlas Mountains, randomly, and it has been named like that forever, for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and they are in Morocco. And it's the only place in the world that has a chain of mountains called the Atlas Mountains. Who was Atlas? He was the son of Poseidon. He was the king of Atlantis. The Aztecs in Mesoamerica, they say that they are the descendants from a land that was called Aztlan. Do you see similarities? Aztlan, Atlantis, Aztlan, Atlantis. I mean, if you connect the dots, it's all in front of your eyes. And when Plato described where Atlantis was, he said it's past the Pillar of Hercules. The Pillar of Hercules are between Southern Europe and North Africa, Southern Europe in Spain, and North Africa in Morocco. That's the Pillar of Hercules. It's that tiny part between Africa and Europe, between Morocco and Spain. Those are the Pillars of Hercules. And it just happened that Morocco has the Atlas Mountains. So the description, you just have to connect the dots. The land of Atlantis was in the Atlantic Ocean, past the Pillars of Hercules. Because Plato said you have to go outside of the Pillars of Hercules to find Atlantis. It's just back in those times, that was considered as the end of the world. No one knew what was there. Again, if you visit some of these islands that are still in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, those are the remnants. According to Plato, 12,000 years ago is actually when the flood happened. He described it to exist prior to the flood. The flood that happened all around the world that many cultures speak of. You go to every culture in the whole world. It doesn't matter which country. They all speak of the flood. The monotheistic religions speak of the flood. Hinduism speak of the flood. in the Sumerian religion with the Anunnaki, they speak of the flood. Or some of you may know it as the flood of Noah. It's a cataclysm that happened that even science proves to have happened. Even science and geologists proved that there was a flood 12,000 years ago. So even science proved so. So we all agree that there was a flood 12,000 years ago. Everyone agrees on that. You go to the east, to the west, to the north, to the south, every culture speaks of that flood. So it did happen. And that flood washed the earth out of a different era that existed prior to that flood. It's an era that was magical, that had beings you probably have never seen before. It had humans that were very different from us right now. It had deities, it had gods. Everyone coexisted. As a matter of fact, after the flood happened, the main race that was surviving on Earth but devolving at the same time was humans. The other races, the other beings, the other mythological creatures, they kind of all disappeared after the flood. Some of them remained, but most of them were gone. The ones that survived but devolved at the same time were humans. They regressed. They forgot all of the knowledge and the wisdom that they had prior to that flood. Because, I mean, let's be clear, it has been 12,000 years. That's a long time. So all of that knowledge was lost. Even, as I have mentioned, even the knowledge to build the pyramids was lost. The Egyptian pharaohs, they tried to mimic the Great Pyramid of Giza. They tried to mimic it and they couldn't. They built whack pyramids. Tiny whack pyramids that looked nothing like the Pyramid of Giza. So that knowledge disappeared. Over thousands and thousands of years, the knowledge that humanity had was gone. And that's why we are where we are right now. And I want to connect this to the Anunnaki. What does this have to do with the story of the Anunnaki? The Anunnaki were also deities, gods, higher beings that were involved in the creation of the first humans. It is probably the parallel of the Abrahamic stories, the God that created Adam. Those were Anunnakis. It's the parallel. It's just in Sumeria, they called them the Anunnaki. In Abrahamic religions, they called them God. But these are higher beings that were responsible for creating the first human beings. The first human beings who were giants, who lived very long, who were very advanced, but they still were not at the level of the deities or the gods. They were still lower beings. So can you imagine how we are compared to the deities? We're like tiny ants. Because we're not even giants anymore. We're not tall. We can't use magic as how they used to. If someone makes it to 100 years, everyone is impressed. We think that living for 100 years is a long life. You see how far behind we are compared to the Atlantean civilization? But in monotheistic religions, it is said that the gods caused the flood. The only parallel with that is that in the Sumerian religion, it is said that the boss of the Anunnaki, the main god, Enlil, caused the flood. In other cultures as well, in Mesoamerica, it is said that the gods caused the flood. Science says that it was a natural catastrophe. And then we have the story of the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch depicts the story of the gods and how the Watchers, or the fallen angels, they didn't do what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to watch over humans on earth, but instead of doing so, they started mating with them, raping them, and controlling everything. So gods and humans are not supposed to mix. But the Watchers, in the story of Enoch, or the fallen angels, or let's put these labels aside, a group of deities, they didn't follow the rules. they started doing whatever they wanted with the humans. And they disobeyed the word of the main deity, or God. They disobeyed the orders, which, by the way, might have led to the creation of Atlantis, because these watchers or fallen angels taught humans everything. They mixed with them, they mated with them, which could have led to the creation of Atlantis. And I believe that Poseidon, Zeus, Hades are also one of these watchers. They're some of these deities who mated with humans. I mean, just read the Greek mythology and you'll see what these Greek gods were doing to humans. They mated a lot with them. And when I say mated, I mean rape. So some of these deities that were revered and everyone prayed to them, they were basically disobeying the higher deities that were giving them orders. Only watch over humans, don't mingle with them, don't interfere with their lives, but watch over them. That was their orders, but they didn't follow those orders. And they started ruling, and they started taking advantage of humans, asking them to worship them. Oh, you're human beings, you have to worship me because I'm a deity. Give me offerings, worship me, or else. And that's why a lot of humans were terrified of these ancient gods. If you read any mythological story from ancient cultures, you'll see that the humans were terrified of these gods. They worshipped them, they revered them, they built statues and temples for them all around the world, and they were terrified of them because these gods were taking advantage of everyone. They were enslaving humans, they were raping them, using them as pawns, as toys. And that's why the higher beings in the Anunnaki story, it's Enlil, they were fed up with this madness. They learned that these lower gods were taking advantage of humans and using them as slaves. So the higher gods learned of this fact and they decided to flood the whole thing to get rid of everything and get rid of Atlantis as well, because things were getting out of control. So there's a lot of details that are associated with this story, and I'm not going to go into those details because no one really knows. Even if someone comes to you and says, I know the details of what really happened. No one knows the details. We have the gist of the story. You can connect the dots based on what different cultures have said, and you can come up with your own results. That's the only thing you can do. So these higher gods or higher beings, or in the case of the Sumerians, Enlil, caused the flood. In the case of Abrahamic religions, it's the main god who caused the flood to get rid of this madness, where everyone that was on land died and crashed and disappeared, except for a few people. We have the story of Noah, who salvaged few humans, few animals to restart civilization from scratch. And, surprisingly, that's why our modern day and age, we have humans and animals. We don't have mythical creatures. We don't have deities and gods. We don't have these mythical beings that are written in ancient stories. The main beings that exist are animals and humans. It's because they were the main survivors that Noah led to refuge. Meaning that all the other beings, all the other deities were dead, were gone in this flood. They were obliterated. They were doing what they were not supposed to do. They were breaching the rules, they were disobeying the orders of higher beings, and these higher beings or higher gods decided to get rid of them. I'm not sure if you knew this before, but this 3D plane exists mainly for humans, animals, and some spirits. It's not all kinds of spirits, some types of spirits. Because according to Buddhism, the plane of earth, you can only reincarnate in it if you're a human, an animal, or a hungry ghost. They call them hungry ghosts. They're basically spirits who are trapped. This plane of existence is not meant for the gods. It's not meant for higher beings to mingle around, but that's what they did. And that's why they had to be dealt with. How? Through the flood. And the flood of Atlantis was terrifying. That's why many of you probably remember that past life. That's why many of you are scared of water. You're probably scared of swimming. You probably have flashes of that flood. It was terrifying because the whole continent sank. Can you imagine that? And it was gone. It was a horrifying experience. 5 years ago, I did a trip in Morocco along the Atlas Mountains to explore the land in there and the energy there. And it was a truly fascinating trip. It was a 10-day trip. I think it was 10 days. I combined everything into a 2-hour-long video that it's posted on this channel. It's called In the Search for Atlantis. You can find it. It's a 2-hour-long video where I film and document all of my trip to find Atlantis in the Atlas Mountains of Morocco. And towards the end, I have this epiphany and I find this beautiful land that's on the Atlantic Ocean. And I think that's where the flood happens, because the land was connected to the Atlantean continent. So feel free to watch that video. That trip meant a lot to me and it gave me a new perspective about Atlantis. Another thing I want to add is that Atlantis sank 12,000 years ago, but it has existed thousands and thousands of years prior to that. But humans used to live longer. The beings that were on Atlantis around the world used to live longer. We don't know for how long Atlantis existed, but it's for a very, very, very long time. Way more than 12,000 years ago, which is when it sank 12,000 years ago. Atlantis, the Atlantean civilization, existed for way more than 12,000 years, way more. So if the story of Atlantis truly resonates with you, as it has with me the first time I heard it, and that's why I went and did that trip in Morocco, because I needed to find what that feeling is like. And I'm still not done. I still have other areas to explore as well in the future, when the universe allows it. But if that story resonates with you and when you hear it, you just feel something so real about it, that means that you've been there, you had a past life there, or you just know that it's real. But what can we learn from the story of Atlantis? We can learn that civilizations come and go. Life exists as a cycle. The Buddha said it. We are stuck in the cycle of samsara. So everything exists in cycles. Your life, your reincarnation, civilizations, empires, countries, they all rise and disappear. Rise and disappear. Cycles repeating. The civilization is rising, it's becoming advanced, and then it goes away. And then another one, and then another one, and then another one. Just like Atlantis. And after Atlantis came Egypt. It was the Egyptians and the Sumerians, the Mesopotamians. And after that it was the Greeks and the Persians. And after that it was the Romans and the Islamic Empire and the Arabs. And after that it was the European civilization in Europe in the Middle Ages. And after that it transitioned to America, to the continent of America. And I'm not even talking about the East, the civilizations that existed in the East, with the Khmer civilization, for example, that was thriving, and what was going on in China, what was going on in India. Civilizations rise and disappear. Life exists in cycles, always, because it is bound by the rules of the cycle of samsara. Atlantis existed for very long. It rose, but then it disappeared. Right now we have another type of advancement. It's rising, but it will disappear. I hate to break it for you, but it will. Because there are many predictions in different cultures, also in the Buddhist culture, that the world will end accordingly based on the elements. Once it will end with the element of earth, another time it will end with the element of water, that's the flood, and it has happened. Another time it will end with the element of fire, and then another time it will end with the element of air. Civilizations rise, and then they get to a peak, and then they start causing madness and problems. They lose the dharma, they lose the way of living, they don't know how to love each other, they submerge themselves in destruction and hate and suffering and killing each other, killing animals, destroying the earth, and then they have to be washed away. They have to be completely obliterated. How? Maybe with water, it has happened to Atlantis. Maybe with fire, maybe with earthquakes, or maybe with air. So there's going to be another destruction that will come, because where we are heading is not a good path. We are heading towards destruction, hate, love. True love is diminishing year after year around the world. People are just hating each other. They're going into wars with each other, killing each other, killing the animals, not caring for what's going on to Earth. So another catastrophe will come. It will destroy everything, just like Atlantis. I don't know when. It could be next month, or it could be 500 years from now. But another catastrophe will come. It will take everything away, and the cycle will repeat again. So you're always stuck in this cycle, unless you transcend this cycle of samsara by gaining enlightenment. Or you can call it whatever you want. Nirvana, ascension. That's what I have for Atlantis. Many of you watching this video are Atlanteans. Many of you. If you believe in Atlantis, know that it's real. Know that you have lived there. And everything that you feel about it is true. But it has happened. It's in the past. The problem is that humans become attached to things. You're not supposed to be attached to the fact that you are an Atlantean. There's nothing to gain from that. Yes, I was an Atlantean. I even traveled to discover where the land was. Sure, I was an Atlantean, but what does that do to me? Nothing. I am who I am right now, and I'm working to evolve and grow spiritually and to reach the level that is much higher. And you're supposed to find your own path that will take you to a higher level as well. So remember that. Acknowledge the fact that Atlantis existed for a reason, but just aim to do good in your life. Accumulate good deeds, good karma, be loving, act from the center of your heart always. Help others. Know that life is not about selfishness. It's not about just doing things for me. It's not about just gaining things. Because if you do so, then you're just going to keep repeating cycles. Just like many of us, how we are repeating the cycle of Atlantis. Because yes, Atlantis existed before. It has become a myth. But we are in another Atlantis right now. We just don't know it. So let me know in the comment section, what do you think about Atlantis, about the story of Atlantis? Do you think you've had a reincarnation there? And what have you learned from that? I want to know your opinion about that. Thank you very much. I hope this is helpful. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.